Welcome to Philly Tech Connect podcast, where Philly's tech minds meet. CEOs, developers, dreamers. This is your space. Each week we explore the journeys of tech innovators. Join us and be inspired.
Hey everyone, Dave here with another episode of the Philly Tech Connect podcast. Today I'm speaking with Pierce Baugh. Pierce is the software development space for over 3 decades, building custom applications used by large organizations like Crayola, Casio, Disney, and the NFL. He's also built applications for numerous nonprofit organizations, particularly in the Child Nutrition Association space. In 2021, he launched strategic database systems to help smaller businesses and startups succeed in their custom SaaS and business automation efforts. He and his team are democratizing custom application development by using a combination of time-proven low-code tools and cutting-edge technologies, often in hybrid solutions which deliver maximum value to clients. Pierce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dave. How about you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited for the weekend. We have our Super Bowl coming up on Sunday. This is recorded on Friday. So by the time this is out, we will know the result. Hopefully it's in our favor. I know you're excited as well because I believe you commented on the Eagles shirt the last time we spoke that I was wearing. But today we're going to be talking about software development. And there's some interesting, choice words in your bio that I'd love to learn more about because I've heard about them, but I've never actually used them. And that's kind of the no-code, low-code stuff. And so for starters, perhaps you could kind of define in your own best words, the definition of no-code, low-code, and I guess code is probably the third alternative.
Sure. Yeah, so it has a long history, and I'm not sure everybody really realizes how far back it goes. But there's been certainly low-code solutions from the 80s on. So it's always been there. Tools like Clarion and even things like Visual Fox Pro and stuff, where a lot of apps were built, late 80s, early 90s, and those platforms, and they really were introducing the idea of code widgets, which is kind of more your low code side, and drag and drop interfaces where you're just sort of visually manipulating the screen and not saying, not actually coding, saying at this position on the screen is what we're going to show you. So it's not new. And I've always been, to me, to get from the concept, and the quickest way from the concept to actually having a product or software that's working, that's the objective in my mind. It's not it's really, what is the fastest way we can do this, in other words, and it gets into some other kind of deeper realm thinking about visualization and how you think of things in your mind and how quickly you can go from there to actually having something sort of whatever you want to call it, materialize it, or making it real. How quick can you get there? And so low code solutions, no code solutions, to me, help to shortcut that process. And so when I work I typically work with founders, owners at that level. I'm really sitting there and kind of just really coming to kind of a mind melt with them. And as we talk, to me, it just starts to formulate a picture in my mind of what this is going to look like and how it's working. And since I have a lot of deep work in databases my whole career, so I just started to think about data structures almost instantly when I'm talking to people. So really, it's about that sort of robust design in terms of data structure is important, because if you have that, then you can kind of take your low code solutions. And the difference between low code and no code is low code means you're going to go in there. I have a platform that I use. It's little known. It's called PHP Runner, one of the tools that I use. And a great amount of the application is just built by saying, here's the data, here's the data structures, this is what we're going to label these fields, and this is the order of them, and all sorts of stuff like that. But then you inevitably you're going to want to do some things that aren't off the shelf. So you create a button, and when you click on that, what you do is you put the code in that button. So that's actually hand coded, but it's only I don't know, 10, 15 lines of code. It's not like it's thousands of lines of code. And so it's really easy. There's so many advantages to that, but it's really easy. When you walk away from something, you come back 3 months later, it can be really difficult. But when it's all visual like that, hey, there's the screen, there's the button. I open that button up. Here's what it's going to do. So if you have to change it or something's going wrong or whatever, you know exactly where to look. So there's a lot of maintenance advantages to that as well. So I like low code because it does allow you to create those really specific things. If I want to hit an API and pull data back, like for instance, like if I'm going out to ChatGPT or something, right? So that's not going to be off the shelf, right? So I'm going to click on a button and it's going to say, hey, go out, take this prompt, go out to ChatGPT, bring it back, put it in, let's say an email template, put it into the email template, and then they can go ahead and manipulate it from there. So that's the power of low code, because I don't have to have that component available, but I can do all the rest. So 95% of the application, I don't have to do any of that kind of stuff for. But for that extra, bit that we need, that's where it comes in. A full, like, Airtable is more of like a no-code platform, where even with Airtable now you can do some code, but like essentially you're just working with all the components, and you can't, like, it doesn't allow you that fine tuning of customization, but low code does. So, but it's all kind of getting blurred, because like I said, Airtable was no code, but now you can code in it and stuff like that. So that's changing. But the advantage is to be able to go from idea, visualization, concept to product as quickly as possible.
Makes sense. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, that's what's so powerful and exciting about it, and it really leads to.
Great. Well, I have sort of more questions here, because so as a marketer, someone without coding background, but who has worked on software products before my own, I sense like no code, it feels a little marketer to me, like it's just this promise of a DIY solution, and I've never actually experimented with it. I wonder if it is. I mean, I guess, strategic database systems is somewhat of, I understand it to be somewhat of a software development agency. And so if these solutions are really no code or low code, why is it we need help from an agency to get it done? What am I missing here?
That's actually a great question. You in some ways, in some aspects, you don't, right? If you want to go into, like, you can go into Airtable and build out a little application for yourself with essentially relational tables. They kind of hide that nicely, but if it's basically, that's the power of it. And it has now all of these tools and stuff, and you can build yourself a nice system that allows you to, like a group of people. Let's say if you have 5 people on your team, you can interact, you can do stuff, and you could build that on your own. And where you want a professional involved, there's a design, like we're all professionals, right? But where you want to bring in like professional sort of software design experiences is kind of like, there's a couple of things. There's if you want to sell something as a SaaS platform, then you got to bring somebody in that's going to kind of know how to do that, because your solution needs to be something that's what's called runtime free. So when I build something in my platform, it generates code, and that code I can put it on Azure, I can put it on Amazon, I can put it on anything, Google, I can put it on any cloud, right? And I run it, and there's a fee to run that application, but there's no license that I'm paying, because it's all, I own it at that point, which is different than saying I'm using, there's a lot of low code type tools out there now, where there's a certain, I'm looking at a platform called Softer. There's a certain seat, like you have seat licenses, and you got to be careful with that, because when you get into seat licenses, now if you're doing well, all of a sudden you have 500 users or more than that,
It's
And
very
now you're
expensive.
paying per person, right? And that's just coming off of that's off your profit, you know. But if you have a runtime free application, which means that you own that code, you run that code, well, you go up to 2,000 users, there's no change in fee. The only thing you're paying for is CPU performance and database size, but that doesn't cost a lot. That you can do that for like less than $100 a month and get a couple thousand users on a platform. So much different than incrementally I'm paying $50 or $35 for each person that uses the platform. So that's what you have to keep in mind.
That's a very important distinction. I want to make sure I clarify. So when you talk about runtime free software, am I thinking of like the traditional model of just kind of coding from scratch and putting it up on, Amazon services, Azure or something like that? This is not like a low code, no code, where those pricing models tend to be like pay per user type of a thing.
Both. That's a spectrum. So you can definitely, like, the tool I use is a low code tool, and it generates free software, like free runtime free software. So I pay for the license for the platform, but it builds I can build as many things as I want with that. Flutterflow is kind of like in between, because Flutterflow will build. It is low code. It's not as low code as I would like it to be, but it's low code, and it's very, very modern, and you can do basically anything with the interface, and it will generate mobile software, right? So you can do an iOS app. From the same code base, you can create a web app, an iOS app, or an Android app, native Android and iOS. So if you want to sell it on the Play Store, whatever you're going to do it, you can sell your app on those things, and you own that. And you can host it wherever you want. So there are tools that are low code that allow you to do runtime free, but there's the majority of low code tools the newer stuff, they want you to kind of run it on their platform, and then you pay a licensing fee to run it on their platform. And that it's okay for small audiences, but if you're thinking of scaling to thousands of users, you'll get
economically it's not really sustainable in the long run. So is it a fair statement that the majority of no code and low code products are for internal use, where, hey, you can cut corners, you don't need the full, you're not looking to kind of grow a large user base, you maybe don't need all the security. Whereas if you're looking to maybe commercialize a software product and maybe build it to scale and exit from it, it's less common. Is that fair or no?
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, a lot of the newer stuff says right there, it's for internal use. Right, like when you first look on the first page, it'll say for internal use. So it's like early on. That's not the type of stuff that I build. So I feel like I've got a great combination of tools that allow me to build real commercial software, but use low code to get there faster. And but you just touched on something it's really important. Things like security, and I don't just mean like, is it a secure platform? I mean like what I call horizontal and vertical security. So what you can see and who you can see. So if you start to do something, especially if you can go to a B2B in a SaaS type environment, you really somebody has to know how to do that kind of security structure, so that when I log in, I only see, let's say, it can be tenant based, so multi-tenancy, so that if you have multiple clients using one platform, they log in, they only see their stuff, right? But it can also be like within a company, it could be a region. Like I only see my region, or I can see my region, but I can see all the regions, but I can only edit in my region. So all that kind of sort of granular control over security, that's where you need somebody like who's got a lot of experience at it, that knows how to build that out. I think a lot of people now are sort of start from the outside and work their way in. And it's I sort of have a contrarian, I guess by today's mindset, a contrarian approach to it, because like I start from the bottom and then build it out from there. But I do see that where there's such an emphasis on UX that, you got this very nice looking package, but when you start to try to do anything like any kind of multi-tenancy, or like it starts to scale, it starts to really show that it'll break, because that stuff wasn't built from the beginning. And then it's hard to tack that stuff on at the end. And I'm actually doing that for a client where we've done a ton of reverse engineering to make it multi-tenant, to be able to handle B2B. Because once you go out of like a direct to consumer mode, and you're going into B2B mode, then everything changes, and you're building something very different at that point. And it's just as important what your B2B client has access to in terms of analytics and everything else, as it is the actual application. So in a case like that I have, there's an application that people are hitting all the time, but then there's organizations that are sponsoring those people to be on that platform, for, let's just say, and they need a whole different set of tools. So it's like a whole other application, so that they can kind of see, well, what's happening, what's the engagement. Everybody kind of wants to know what their engagement is. If you're like, I work with memberships associations, what's the engagement, what's happening, what's the pipeline of people coming in, and things like that. So there's like almost two sides and sometimes you can kind of get hyper focused on the look and the interactivity of what's public, but that's, you gotta look at both sides.
Yeah.
And from the beginning,
you got to be forward thinking, right? I want to mention a use case that I don't think it's kind of come up yet, but something that I've heard of, in the no code, low code, which is really around idea validation. And so it's sort of, you want to put out an MVP, you want to do it as quickly as possible. And, you don't want to necessarily hire, developers and things that maybe you don't have access to the resources. So you kind of use a no code solution. And then if you get traction, then you might think to go into something more, I don't know, robust or something like that. Is that a use case that you see often or you see as viable?
I do, but I have some sort of thoughts on how to do that smartly. Okay. There's a product called Supabase. I don't know if you've heard of it. Okay. So it's a very modern take on Postgres. So it's a Postgres database, but it's got a lot of stuff wrapped around, a lot of functionality that's wrapped around it, like for security and cron and things like that. So there's a lot that it's got built into it around it. So because of the way it's structured, it is like Flutter Flow will work with it, software will work. All these platforms, almost all of them, are now work with Supabase. So Supabase is more of like a traditional, at the core of it, it's traditional SQL database. So what I'm excited about is you can build something, you could use these very modern tools, use something like Supabase, and then you're building your architecture, your database doesn't have to change, right? So I've got like a low code platform. I could build stuff on Supabase really quick, right? And I can have an MVP out like in a couple months. Then when you get funding or when you get traction, then you can hit that same database and that same architecture from a Flutter Flow or something like that, right? And have, mobile and everything, like mobile native and all of that stuff. So you sort of have, your core hasn't changed. And now you haven't lost that investment that you've got in terms of your infrastructure. And you can then seamlessly go to new products and things like that. And you can, like in my case, like I like to use this low-code platform that I use as the admin tool then. And then and I've been doing this for years, where we build that, you can hit that, use that database as your like sort of center of where your world, your universe, then you can hit it from different places, right? So I can use a low code platform it's great for admin and all that stuff. But then I can use something like Flutter Flow, or I can actually choose to go, straight code, right? I could run a node stack against that, and I can be using React and heavy dev thing if I want. but meanwhile, nothing has changed. Your data hasn't changed, and now you've got a seamless migration to the future, and you've got both. And then and that, to me, that is what's, I'm super excited about the super base. I guess that's why they call it that. But it really it allows you to use. It's a great migration from old to new, and it can be in the center of it all, and you're doing great. You don't have to go to a NoSQL, Firebase or something like that, because Mongo, all that stuff. You can use sort of this solid, tried and true data SQL database in the middle, but it will work with all the new tools, that's pretty cool.
It sounds interesting, and I'll admit, as a non-technical person, I may not fully be understanding, but I kind of had this assumption that sometimes when you're trying to validate an idea or maybe build an MVP, you might do that with no code, low code, and then if you validate it, you might actually just throw out everything you did, and now like, okay, we have validation, let's go code and build the actual thing. What you're describing sounds like this initial approach with low code, no code, and then you can evolve into the code without losing the work that you already did. If I understand,
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any? Go ahead.
And I'm working in a real world scenario where that, actually I've done it multiple times, but I'm working in a real world scenario where that is the case. And they went from MVP was built, and then they kind of like. It just, you got to be careful that your MVP does become your product, and you got to, if you got a couple hundred users or 1,000 users on there in your MVP mode, and all of a sudden, I mean, it's one thing to show somebody a demo, but it's very different once you start to get traction. You know what I mean? Like it does allow you to move much more gracefully, to the future, rather than saying, oh, we're going to throw this whole platform around. We're going to do data conversions. We're going to do all this stuff to try to get in. We're going to push a button one day, and everybody's going to move over. And that can be a nightmare. That can go well or not. So
yeah. My last question is whether or not there are certain types of applications that should lend themselves more to a no code, low code type of solution, or not. Like CRMs, project management tools, those types of things. To me, they seem kind of straightforward. They feel like they'd be a perfect fit for like a no code, low code. But maybe there are certain applications where just the natural elements or sequence of events, it just doesn't fit the model. Have you come across anything that feels preferred or not preferred?
Oh yeah, I think you're dead on. I mean, I think CRM and I work with a lot, like I said, a lot of associations and groups like that, where it's it's membership. If you think about something like Facebook, right? I mean, and that's now massive, right? But that's just a database application. It's just data. Like a lot of stuff is just data. But if you get into something that's highly graphical, any kind of video game, or if you want to like really get into graphical stuff where you're doing some real cutting edge work, that's got to be that you're into hard code there. There's no way around it. You can't, I mean, you just don't have the tools. Nothing has the tools to be able to like do a lot of visual manipulation on the screen. You got to drop into some heavier stuff to do that, So I think that's really there's so many business applications where you don't need that. It's more straightforward. But yeah, there's definitely a line to where certain technologies require that, But the other thing we haven't really talked at all about is all of these process automation tools that are out there, starting with like Zapier and N8N and all that, and where they, that's the glue, and you can kind of do this. And if you have a database, it's even better, because then you can choose what you're going to dump off. But that's a whole different visual programming, and that's like no code. You're just saying, hey, I'm gonna. But the funny thing about no code is, especially I saw this with Flutterflow. They say it's no code, and it is no code, but like there's so many damn variables that you have to keep track of. I mean, you might as well be coding at that point, because it's just so complicated. So it's a great platform, does a lot of stuff, but it's also endlessly complex in terms of what it can do. And so
no code does not mean easy.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't mean doesn't necessarily mean uncomplicated, and you can get into like some scenarios with even with the Zapier, that where you're getting into some pretty complex stuff, and you get to know some JavaScript and stuff like that to make it really do what you want. N8N is another tool like that. It's actually a little more cost effective, but it's a little closer to JavaScript with some of the stuff you have to do.
Cool. Pierce, for people that want to learn more about strategic database systems, how should they find you?
strategicdatabasesystems.com. My name is Pierce Baugh. I'm Pierce Baugh on LinkedIn, and Pierce at strategicdatabase.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pierce.
Strategic Database Systems. I even forget the name.
strategicdatabasesystems.com.
Yeah.
Cheers. Have a good one.
That's all for today's episode of Philly Tech Connect. Join our community at phillytechentrepreneurs.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, Shortlist.io, a digital marketing agency specializing in top-notch link building, content strategy, and web design. Stay innovative, Philly, and see you next time on Philly Tech Connect.